Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Psych Minds Podcast. Today, there's no guest, it's just me. And today's going to be a bit of a reflection on what it has been like doing 10 episodes, reflecting back on the experience, like lessons learned, thoughts I've had doing the podcast, and where I see it going forward. And, it's been interesting. There's been ups and downs. I've had my excitement go up and also die down. And there's a lot of interesting and conflicting emotions and thoughts and ideas that pop in my mind. Like, it's just insane to believe that it's 10 episodes in. When you start it, you go in with sort of a naive mindset that I will have no issue doing this for however long it takes. But to at least be 10 episodes in is just mind-blowing. There's a statistic that I think like 97% of podcasts ever started don't make it past 3 episodes. And if you in 10 episodes, you're like in the top 97% of all podcasts ever made. And that's a humbling reality. And, it feels like it's gone by in the blink of an eye. I really have not felt the time go by. I mean, 10 episodes is 10 weeks. There are 4 weeks in a month. So it's basically 2.5 months. Doing this consistently, diligently. And it's not just the podcast, it's also the newsletter. Like, I really enjoy doing both of them. And I sort of like, it's not exclusively 10 items, but it's 10 things that I've narrowed them down to that I've learned. And each of them I've given like a generic title. So the first one is from a quote that I like, that I've seen. It's just like a post I saw an image of, and it's always in the back of my mind with things. And it's, we do this not because it is easy, but because we thought it would be. And it's when you start doing anything, you have a preconceived notion or idea in your mind of what doing it will be like. We have this idea that we can predict how anything will go, how it will change. And those predictions that we have tend to be false. We do not see the unforeseen circumstances. We do not see the other stuff we need to know. And in terms of doing the podcast, well, sure, I knew I'm probably going to have to look at how recording works, the quality of the sound, how it's going to sound, how the video is going to be. But even with that, I was still overwhelmed, like the stuff I had to learn. Well, for one, if you've seen like the first episode to this one, you've noticed like it looks different. And I'm actually proud of the stuff I've learned, the way I've changed it, the way I've set up everything around in the room. Like, I've got my own little studio. And, part of me wishes always that I could have had like a proper studio or a separate room where I didn't have to move around everything in my bedroom, set up every time I want to record. But part of me is also somewhat nostalgic about it and glad that I do all of that, because this is going to be the story I have in my mind one day that I'm going to tell people, like, yo man, if you want to start a podcast, just start it now, start it in your room. Like, I can genuinely say and speak from experience that you don't need much to get started. Standing here in front of my phone, set up on a tripod, and me speaking into a mic. Well, the mic I did buy separately, but it's not having this idea that I need all the perfect equipment. Everything has to be perfect. I have to be at the finish line already. Like, I have to have that supreme quality. No, it's part of the process, and enjoying the process. Everything I learned is not going to be in vain. Like, I like that I learned about lighting, and Like how different lighting setup will look on the camera. It's not just you put up a camera and it's going to look supreme and clean and all of that. No, there's a lot more thinking that goes into it. I learned stuff that I'm also not even using in this podcast, like, for instance, the focal length of the camera, because I'm not using a camera, just a phone. And, when it gets to that point that I do get a camera, then maybe, then already I have some prior knowledge, like how to work with the white balance, how to calibrate it, and all that things. There's profit in all labor. There's always going to be value in learning any new skill. Nothing will be in vain. And there's always joy in doing something. It gives yourself evidence and reinforcement that you are mutable, that you can change, that there are things of you that you can work on, it gives you a sense of hope. That even though I am who I am now, I can still be more. And it gives you more faith. It reaffirms this mindset and belief in yourself. And, and I think again also that quote, we do this not because it is easy, but because we thought it would be easy. If I look at the different elements of doing the podcast, it's talking, like bloody hell. You'd think talking is easy. But through doing the podcast, it's habits in my communication that I come to be aware of, And that's one of the things, I realized I say, a lot. And I became more aware of every single I say, every single time I say, yes, da. And you realize there's these inefficiencies in the way you speak is what I've seen with myself. It's little things you would not otherwise be aware of. And outside of the podcast, I would imagine being aware of these have value. You realize when, that you're doing these things repeatedly and that you can probably articulate yourself a bit better. You can look how you could construct your argument differently. You become more deliberate in the way you think, the things you say, but also guard yourself against the risk of being overcritical, overanalyzing everything. Finding that delicate balance between actually working on something versus becoming overwhelmed by it, anesthetized to the point that you do not want to take action. You do not want to say something because you fear you're going to mess up what you say. And I've become comfortable also when there's moments where I need a second to process my thoughts and speak. Or moments, as you've seen in this episode itself, where I might say something and the words get caught in my throat. Doing it has made me realize, the stakes are not that low. But also because there is something at stake. I want this podcast to be awesome. I want it to be amazing. I want it to grow. I want people to watch it and be, impressed. I want people to take interest in what I'm saying. So I'm going to work on those things because there is something at stake. But I'm not going to be overwhelmed to the point that I'm not going to do it. It's like a football player, Jeez, every time I say, I'm going to hear it in my head. But it's like a football player. They go out onto the field every week. And if you're going to be so overwhelmed by the consequence of a single action, you're going to be overwhelmed and not take the risk. You're not going to try playing that risky pass that might be this magical moment that unlocks the game and creates that winning goal. But also, you're not going to be so negligent that you're just going to pass the ball all willy-nilly all the time. You're going to do whatever it takes when you are practicing, when you are on the field, not on the field, when you are in the training ground. You're going to make sure that you're giving your all each and every practice session, so that when that moment comes, when it needs this delicate touch, when it needs that finesse, when it needs this higher level of performance, you will be able to deliver because you have this confidence, number one, that you are capable of it. And number two, that, even if it doesn't work out, you gave it a go. You've tried it several times in training. You've seen it work. So why not? What's the worst that can happen? If you have the game tied and you try to pass and it goes to the opposition, well, there's always another time to try again. Like, you have 90 minutes on the field. So there are risks, but you've got to embrace the hard parts of anything as well. You've got to embrace the potential for failure as well. And there's a lot that you learn by doing something. The podcast, if I thought it was easy, realizing that, there's a different type of communication that goes on in a podcast. Because on the one hand, the person I'm talking with is always going to be more knowledgeable on what they are talking about than me. And that's not a dynamic that you will have everywhere, every day. And it's a dynamic that is different because you have to be curious to what somebody else is saying. But on the other hand, I also have to know a bit of what they are saying as well. Because if I really want to get out the knowledge that would be the most valuable, I have to know what questions to ask. So I have to go and research up on who they are, what they are about, what it is they're going to talk about. And, sometimes I act like I don't know what they're talking about, because I know somebody listening is not going to know. Prior to me going and researching the stuff, I did not know that. So when I'm researching, every single question I have serves as a guide for questions I can ask in the podcast. And sometimes I ask all the questions I had on my list, sometimes I don't. And time runs out before I can get to certain questions. And sometimes, or not sometimes, literally every single time, more questions come in. When somebody says something and there's like a thought that springs in my mind, or a question or idea or something. And the more I learn, the more questions come up. The more I realize there's a different way I could do something. So I'm studying psychology, and one of the things I always thought is I'm good at listening to people and I know what questions to ask. But when I do the podcast, and I read a book now recently, Find Out Anything from Anyone, Anytime. I don't remember the author. But reading the book, I realized there's stuff about asking questions that I was not aware of, that I did not even think, that was not even a thought in my mind. And it's simple ideas and concepts and techniques. Like, one is just note-taking. How to take effective notes when asking questions or trying to find out something from somebody. And it's like breaking stuff into 4 categories. It's like pretty simple. Place, people, event in time, and thing. So like an object or concept or something. And then, putting each one in its appropriate category, and then you can see for interrelations between two. It's a nice and nifty technique to use that I've used in the last 2 episodes, and it helps you guide your thoughts. And also, instead of me trying to constantly focus and remember every single thought that springs in my mind, taking note of it, and then focusing on what the person is saying, and then when I want to go back to that question, I have it written down and I can go back to it. It's also looking at the different types of communication. Like, that book for me has proven invaluable. It's also looking at the different archetypes that you might have with different people, like the way different people answer. Whereas one person might circumvent the question, one person won't want to answer your question, they would want to talk about a specific topic and then how to deal with that, how to ask questions differently, the different types of questions you can ask. It's things like that you think asking a question is so simple. But the more you go down the rabbit hole, the more you see every single twist in this tunnel that you are veering down, the more you become immersed, the more you're like, geez, maybe I'm not as knowledgeable as I thought. I'm not as skilled. And the other thing is also I realize I'm better at some things than I thought I would be. And some stuff aren't as tough as I thought they would be. They're actually simpler. Like the video editing, I thought it's going to be so tough because if I look at the price some people charge, like, goddamn. Now I'm like, no, I would think twice before I pay somebody. Like, I know what I can do with video editing, and it makes me less liable to want to pay somebody else for something I could do. But I would probably explore getting an editor if the podcast is very successful, makes money. Then I would invest in that just to save me time so I can focus on the parts of the podcast that I love. And yeah, that's pretty much it I can say for, there are unforeseen challenges that will come along that, initially I might have some preconceived notion of how easy something might be or what it would be like doing it. And through immersion, you learn that there's more to it. It brings me to my second one, and this is from a quote by Carl Jung that I absolutely love, and I've referenced it a few times in the newsletter. It's, no matter how isolated you are and how lonely you feel, if you do your work truly and conscientiously, unknown friends will come find you. And that is something that I've found truth in doing the podcast. Doing the podcast, I've met so many amazing people. If I think just the guests themselves, it's people I would otherwise not have interacted with, that I would not have had the conversations I've had with. Conversations that I personally found value out of. Conversations that I myself learned a lot from. And not even just the conversations with guests, it's conversations with people. Like, before I did the podcast, I've been doing the newsletter. And I would go up to random people and be like, hey man, I'm doing this newsletter. Tell them maybe about the last newsletter, or like, it's a newsletter where I use storytelling to give a message or something like that. And doing that, I've met really great people, and we have conversations about stuff I've written about, or conversations about an idea that I'm thinking about that I want to put in a newsletter, or now with the podcast, like sharing with people what I'm working on, the ideas I have, the guests I'm looking to have, and sharing like the challenges of doing the podcast, the stuff I've learned. Like, it feels so good to have those conversations about things that matter to me and not just simple small talk. It's kind of tough to talk with somebody, if somebody asks, how you doing? And you don't have anything you want to tell people. Like, doing the podcast and newsletter is giving me that exact thing. That when I talk with somebody, I have something to talk about. I have something I'm deeply passionate about, something I'm interested in, and I'm stoked about, that I'm just so eager to share. And none of the work feels in vain. Like, it's really rewarding. When I write about a certain topic in a newsletter and a friend comes up to me and is like, hey, tell me about alchemy. Like, it's actually very flattering. And like the last newsletter where it was about where we think we can predict the outcome of decisions, and I think a guy come up to me and he's like, that was really deep. It's something that I myself have tend to take for granted, and regardless of whether I do the podcast or I write it in the newsletter, it's thoughts I'm having irrespective. Those just serve as the inspiration. Those thoughts serve as the inspiration for what I do. And it's good to have an outlet, because what's the alternative? You keep it all trapped in and it feels like it has absolutely nobody to share it with. You genuinely feel lonely, and most likely are lonely. And because you're not sharing it with anybody and you're not putting yourself out there, you're not talking with others, you have given yourself evidence that there is nobody. But, one of my favorite quotes from Pulp Fiction is, what is it? Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. And it's a bit of a tongue twister. And it's just because you do not have evidence proving otherwise does not mean that something does not exist. So I think the context of the quote is absence of evidence of God is not evidence of God's absence, for instance. And it's just because there's nothing to prove something exists does not mean that it is definitive evidence that something does not exist. I'm talking in circles here, but doing something, you will find somebody. Like, if you are lonely, it means there's literally nobody else. But all it takes is just one person to disprove something. Some stuff seem impossible until it is done once. I mean, for the longest time in history, we thought it's impossible to go to the moon until there was one expedition that made it to the moon. Everything is or seems impossible until it is done. And once it is done, it changes public perception. Everybody knows what is done. People are only able to understand what has been done. They can't foresee a future that is different from the present. And that's one of the flaws with prediction. It's that we believe we are able to predict what will come based on our information of what has been and what has been done. And Steph Curry is one of the most amazing athletes in my mind in this regard. When his scout report, when he was being drafted, his scout report said, he's too small, he shoots too much, he rushes into shots. He's not a traditional point guard, so he can't lead a team. Steph Curry indeed was too small. He was not too small, but he was small. Steph Curry indeed shot a lot. And indeed, he rushed into his shots. But guess what? They judged him based on the current standard of the game, the way everybody thought the game should be played. And now, he is the most revolutionary player that the game of basketball has seen in the last 20, 30 years. There's been no player as revolutionary as him. Every single team focuses on the three-point shot. Every single young player coming up wants to be the next Steph Curry. So many players shoot threes now, it is scary. And the thing is, people could not foresee that Steph Curry would be so good. Like, nobody thought anybody humane could shoot so many threes, like could shoot from the halfway line without fail and make the shot. Like, it was so unheard of, unseen, that people could not fathom that this kid from Davidson would come and change the game. He would play his game. And, his coach, the organization of the Golden State Warriors, they had faith in him. They saw the vision of this kid. They saw that, sure, the game is played this way. But guess what? This kid is going to change the way we play. He's going to be such a big problem nobody will have an answer for, because nobody could foresee it coming. And, well, look at his track record. Look at how many titles Golden State won. It is unprecedented. And point number 3, I titled it, "It's a waste of time." So, why do I do the podcast? What value do I get out of it? Why do I do the newsletter? What value is in it? It's a waste of time. I could look at something else, something that's going to make money. What if this podcast doesn't get bigger? What if it doesn't grow? Then is it just a waste of time? Well, recently I had a friend as a guest on the podcast, Jandy Cunningham. And there was something he said that, keeps playing in my mind. And it's, time is going to pass anyway. You might as well do something. And it's anything. It was, for him, it was why he went and did his PhD. And, a lot of people will be like, there's no way I'm going to study that long. Well, time's going to pass anyways. And if you do something that you feel is beneficial for you and that you enjoy, go ahead and do it. I would encourage you. For me, this podcast, I cannot see it being a waste of time at all. I enjoy all the conversations I have, as I've mentioned before. I really enjoy engaging in the conversations. It has given me so much. I've spoken with people I otherwise would not have. It's forced me to be more deliberate and actually to engage in healthy, repeated practices that I otherwise would not have. I mean, geez, when I was in school, I did English. I didn't write a lot. Now, every single week, I'm writing my newsletter every single week without fail. It is at least like 10 minutes. Okay, not at least every week. Some weeks it's shorter, but it's at least at minimum 5-minute reading time for anybody that is keen on reading. I spend at least 15 to 30 minutes a week writing. And I would have thought by now I would have run out of ideas. I would have maybe got bored. But it's like every week there's something new. There's something that comes to my mind. There's some idea, some concept, something. Like I'm continuously engaged in it. And I'm not thinking of any end outcome. Just doing it is the goal. It is the thing I enjoy doing. The process is what I find joy in. I enjoy writing the newsletter each and every single week. Just that act in itself, I find value out of. The podcast, I don't care about the view number or the subscriber count. Sure, I want it to grow. I want more people to watch it and everything. But in the moment, I am so fixated on the present. I'm fixated on the conversation with the guest in that moment. If I have to think what I would be doing if I was not doing the newsletter and the podcast, hell, I would probably just be playing video games. And I do enjoy video games. I still play video games from time to time, but I know there's other stuff that needs my attention now. And it gives me something constructive to do. I feel good every time I do it. I feel that I've done something worth my time. So I still play video games to relax and clear my mind from time to time, or to spend time with friends playing games. But it's not where I'm playing game just to kill time or watching a series or something. And I genuinely enjoy doing this over and over and over again. And the fourth thing that I think I've mentioned already in some capacity is nobody knows the future. You can't predict how things will go or what will come of it. And this one I wrote specifically with the thought of getting guests for the podcast. And, it can be kind of disheartening sometimes. When you start, you're very optimistic and you're like, oh, it's going to be easy and some stuff. I will get guests doing X, Y, Z. And then you do X and it fails. You do Y, it fails. You do Z, you do get no response. And then there's sometimes when let me take a shot here, a shot in the dark. And it's whoa, I got a response. I would not have anticipated that. And yeah, I've got a couple of interesting guests coming on that I was surprised to actually get a response from. And there were also people that I thought would be guests, that would be keen on being guests, and it's they keep flaking you. You get no response, and then it's okay, or you think somebody would be keen to be a guest, but then they're not really. So it's dampened like my expectations with things, where it's now I just reach out and I don't know what to expect at all. Sometimes it goes amazing, sometimes it goes worse than I expected. So now it's like, just take things as they come. And there's things that you like, oh, this will be a good episode. And then I'm like, I did not enjoy that conversation as much as I thought I would. And then there's times when I'm like, I don't know, what am I going to talk about with this guest? And it ends up being an amazing episode, like one that I thoroughly enjoy. Or one where I'm like, before we do the episode, I'm like, okay, this guy is not responding very well on email. I don't know what it's going to be like doing it with him. And then he's an amazing guest. Like, you get surprised by this person in the most pleasant way possible. And, the idea that nobody knows the future, I also did a lot of research, like in terms of podcasts, what it takes to promote and grow it. And there's all these stuff, like I've got so many emails from people saying, the SEO on your video is not optimized. If you give me a chance, I can help you optimize it, and it'll send a photo of what it is like. But, I'm glad I did the episode with Mariska and Blanche on fishing, and now I look at all of that things with, I'm a bit skeptical about you now. So, yeah, looking at that, and then I look at the podcasts that I really like. And I look at other videos on YouTube, I look at other channels, I look at TikTok and all of that stuff, the ones that are big. And a lot more often than not, they are not big because of, they are repeated stuff they would do. They would be diligent about what they do. But that's not the end all and be all. Like, there's no correct formula for the way to do something. More often than not, a video can go viral randomly for the most random reason. Like, I was browsing YouTube yesterday, and there was this video of a guy playing guitar. The video had 2.4 million views, and I clicked on it. Like, I was keen to see what it's about. And it's this guy sitting there with a guitar, hunched over, long hair over his face, and he's strumming away so passionately, and the song is amazing. And then I look, out of curiosity, I go in, click on his channel, and I look at the other videos. And, this video has 2.4 million views. The others before it have like 10k views, or 12k at most. And then this one is 2.4 million. And then the one after that is like 50k, and then after that it's similar amount of views. And in spite of him putting out these videos diligently each week, he wasn't doing any SEO BS. Like, okay, let me not call it BS because it actually works in some degree. But, he was doing the thing. He was doing the thing he enjoyed, playing the guitar every single week, uploading a video. And it will be the most random moment when things just seem to click and pop off. And that's not something you can prepare for. It's the idea of a black swan. It's this event that seems so unlikely, but whose occurrence is monumental and can be life-changing. And, as much as I will do things to grow the podcast, I know it's highly unpredictable. I can't say that doing this will yield a certain outcome. But it doesn't mean it's not worth putting in effort. Continuously do stuff. You improve your chances of success. Luck is merely a culmination of all the work you put in. And, it brings me to number 5. To be creative, you have to be humble and diligent. And you have to practice diligent. You have to practice deliberately. And, I had a conversation with a friend in the gym, one of the trainers, and he asked me a question. How does somebody who is a creative type do work that is repetitive? Like, how do I find meaning in doing this, work when I'm this creative person with all these ideas and things? How? And that's when a story came to mind, to me, of Pablo Picasso. Pablo Picasso, I think nobody can deny he was an immensely creative individual. But was Pablo Picasso doing different things every single day? No. Picasso, as amazing as he was, if you look at how many paintings he painted throughout his lifetime, he was painting at least a painting every single day. In fact, if you look at the amount, it is most likely he was painting at least 2 or 3 every single day. Now that is quite repetitive in my mind. You know, if I look at any athlete, Lionel Messi is an immensely creative player. How many times do you think he played a simple pass over and over and over and over? Cristiano Ronaldo, he is also regarded as one of the greatest players ever. What does he do every single day? Like, he shows up to training an hour before everybody, and he's normally staying at least an hour or 2 hours after everybody's left, after training. And when he's training, is he doing anything different, anything new? No, he's doing a lot of the fundamentals. He's doing the same thing over and over. But because they do those same things over and over, those repeated actions, they're more comfortable to do something a bit differently. Like, they learn the fundamentals and they nail that down. But not even just that. Practice is also a place for you to engage in the activity in a low stakes situation. You know, it's when you are practicing, you can practice kicking the ball in different ways without fear that anything will go wrong. You know, you can try playing this tricky pass with the outside of your boot a few times, hit it over and over and over. Because, you know, in a match, if you're going to try that over and over and it's not coming off, then yeah, you're going to get subbed off. The coach is going to take you off. Practice is also a place where you can try different permutations, different small variations of what it is you are doing. Like, you know, if you are painting, maybe try just a different brush stroke, or try a different intensity of a color, or whatever it is. And you will, the more you do something, the more you're going to see different ways you can tweak what you are doing. So in terms of, if somebody is a creative person, how can you work in a place where you're doing repetitive stuff? Well, it's also the way you construct the narrative around it. Like, if you're going to go in with the attitude of, this is repetitive for me, I'm a creative person, I can do more than this, you're not going to look at how you can actually be creative in it. You know, if you're doing sales calls and you're just thinking about following the script to the T all the time, even that requires nuance. You know, there's different ways you can look at it. You can look at each person that you talk with as a case study on their own. Like, this person has this interest. They have this desire. How can I give a solution to that? How can I overcome this puzzle in front of me? In repetition, there is room for learning creativity or expressing creativity. Doing things differently. Looking at the way you can alter a particular element of it and how it will influence the end result. There's no such thing as, beyond this. You have to humble yourself. And humility goes a long way. Everybody likes humility in another person. You know, when you see somebody doing something that should arguably be below them, like when you see the CEO going and spending time with everybody, talking with everybody, engaging with them, it communicates so much about a person. Doing those things, doing whatever you do to the best of your ability, communicates so much of you. In John Wick, there's a line that I like that the villain says, and it's, the way you do anything is the way you will do everything. And if you have an attitude of servitude and you put yourself in that situation and you show you are willing, I can guarantee you it will do a lot more for your reputation than you doing what it is you think you should be doing will do. Because that's the thing. Reputation doesn't have a monetary value. And reputation is something that follows you everywhere. Reputation is something that can also be broken easily. It is one of the most valuable commodities. And that is the value in doing, a task that if you feel you're a creative type doing these repetitive tasks, well, it also shows if you're going to have that attitude that maybe you're not as creative as you think. That's what I would also feel about myself. If I feel I'm looking at this and I can only see one way of doing it. Creativity is a measure of how many ways you can see, how many possibilities you believe to be possible. And yeah. Number 6. Find the answers to questions you have. No one is going to magically appear to answer them. And again, this is in terms of doing the podcast, and not just doing the podcast, but also the newsletter, like getting the ideas and these sort of things. And, it's fascinating. When I have a question, like, you can get anything answered for you now, like, period. Like, there's no excuse to not know something. It's your biggest limitation will be whether you ask the right questions. And it's not just asking a person the questions. It's also when you go and search for answers. If you want to know, what is cosmic dust? How do people actually see it? And how do we learn more about it? When you go and search on the internet, you can go level by level, get a bit of information here, a bit of information there, da-da-da-da-da-da. And for myself, when I think about questions I have, with the podcast, anything I want to know, there's books that I can go read, or I want to learn how to do something. When I want to learn how to do my setup, there were videos that I watched and learned from. If I want to learn, how do serial killers think? What goes in their mind? What's the psychology behind it? Well, I have to go find the guest. He's not going to magically appear before me and give me the answers and tell you, hey, this is exactly what you need to know. No, I have to go find the guest. I have to go find the books that give me the answers. You can find out anything in the world now, literally. But you have to take the initiative. You have to go out there and seek it for yourself. Hey, you want to find the gold. The treasure map is not going to magically appear. You have to go and find the map firstly. And then finding the map, you have to follow the map and then go and dig it up. Yeah. And the answers come through doing it. The more you travel, the more you are on this journey, the more you become adapted to it. The more you start to find your way, and you start to see, there's no end goal, but you know what parts are not worth journeying on. And number 7, this is a little prayer that I have on this chain that I normally wear. And it's a prayer that goes like this. Give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to accept the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I alluded to it before with the podcast. There were some guests that were quite challenging to get, where there was obstacles in the way and it seemed like, climbing a mountain. And then there's others where it just went smooth, where I was so pleasantly surprised. And, I've sent out so many emails to different people asking them to be guests, a variety of people. I've asked entrepreneurs, I've asked professionals, I've reached out to researchers, I've reached out to people on so many different platforms. I've tried, I've tried Reddit, I've tried emailing people, I've tried LinkedIn, and I've had mixed success on all of them. There are so many people I would send an email to and they would just not respond. So maybe they are genuinely that busy, or it's also they're not interested. And in fact, I even had one guest that, messaged me and everything. We were emailing, the session was all set up, and then came the day, just ghosted me. No response anymore whatsoever. I followed up a few times, no response, no. And then there's also like people where it was delay after delay after delay. Was like a mountain to... There were so many impediments to getting him as a guest. And looking back, the ones that I struggled to get as guests the most were the episodes I least enjoyed. They were the episodes where it felt like I'm, picking at straws, where it's like, it feels like the guest is disinterested. So you don't see this when you see the recording go up on YouTube, but there's a lot of times where a guest will be sitting on their phone when I'm speaking, and it's made me realize that it's not just about making me put the guest at ease doing the podcast. I also need to be at ease myself. And when a guest is doing that, it communicates to me this interest. And that for me is a filter that this is not a conversation I want to be part of. I want to have guests that value my time as much as I value their time. And now I look at things differently. If I can see it's tough getting somebody as a guest, I move on. Because I know there are people that will value being a guest on the podcast. There are people that are keen on it. In fact, he's the guy I have as my next guest. This guy was absolutely amazing. What's his name? Jay Shafadini. He was so amazing. I asked him for a book recommendation, and he gave it on the same day. We met up like to just meet before doing the recording, and we spoke easily for 10 to 15 minutes. Like, he was already telling me things he would talk about. You just got this energy of excitement, and it is infectious. When somebody really wants to talk with you, it makes talking with somebody that much easier. The people that want to talk with you will make effort. And I believe that goes for anything, not just the podcast. It goes for all avenues, all walks of life, I would imagine. And that's a good measuring stick I'm going to use going forward. Because it's actually scary now when I think when I first started the podcast, I did 3 episodes in a row without fail. And then there was 2 weeks where I couldn't get a guest. And then I recorded 1. And then the following week I missed an episode because a guest just didn't pitch up. Had the session scheduled and everything. And then since then it's been how many episodes? 6 episodes without fail. Every single week, a new episode, different guest. And now I have 2 episodes in reserve, like recorded and just needs to be edited and uploaded. So 2 weeks sorted. I have 2 recordings this week, 1 the following week, and 1 the following week. So then I will likely have about 5 episodes in reserve. No? Oh no, it's not 2, it's 3 next week. So I will actually have about 4 episodes in reserve after next week, Monday. And it's a comforting feeling, not having to get a guest every single week, not having that anxiety creep in that if I don't get a guest, I don't have anything to upload. And, I've kind of let myself down. That I have this promise that I've made to myself that I will put out the episode every single week, and I have failed at it. To now having it sorted for weeks in advance, where I'm flirting with the idea of making 2 episodes a week. But I don't think I'll do that this year just because of load management. I am still studying and need to focus on that as well. And on the side as well, tutoring. So yeah, I don't want to overwhelm myself too much. I think I'm managing fine doing the 1 episode a week. And, in addition to the episodes each week, it's creating content to upload every single day, creating the shorts, and then the newsletter as well. It can be quite a lot, Yeah, yeah, and bringing it back to having the courage to change the things I can. It's having that optimism to reach out to people that I find interesting, that I would want as guests. And this is where I got pleasantly surprised. So there's a book I've been reading, or 2 books, that I got recently, and I just randomly decided one day, let me see if I can find a way to get in contact with the authors. I sent them an email telling them what my podcast is, what it is about, why I like their work, why I think they would be good guests, and I was so pleasantly surprised to get a response. I mean, on the one email, I even got the author's name wrong. So getting a response really felt like there are amazing people out there. People that, in spite of my channel not being big, will give me a shot. And if you do not have that optimism, you do not have this hope in your heart that things can go well, you won't take the actions that will ultimately get you what you want. If I didn't do that, I would have not got him as a guest. I would have continued struggling, having this pessimistic mind state, and bemoaning why my channel's not growing, why I'm unable to get guests, blaming everything out there, blaming the world, instead of looking within to what I could do. And it's the difference between the victim narrative and being an autonomous person. So recently I did an episode with what was his name, Cameron Harmon, and we spoke about psychopaths and sociopaths. And one thing that stuck out to me is the role of the victim narrative in their actions. And it's that if the perceived injustice done unto you is great enough, it justifies whatever action you take to rectify it. And if you feel the world has wronged you, you're going to think it is fine to see the world burn. You're going to want to see blood. If you feel, hey, my mother did all these horrible things to me, you're going to think, it's fine if I kill her. It's fine if I kill this woman that reminds me of her, that treats me like my mother did. Having a negative mindset like that is not conducive to you. Because what do you get out of it? What did any of those killers get out of it? Did they feel fulfilled once they actually acted on their urges and their impulse? No. In fact, a killer like Ed Kemper, the moment he killed his mother, he went and killed another woman. He killed her friend. And, well, he didn't really care much about when he killed her. In fact, he went and turned himself in afterwards. Because, well, you do feel empty afterwards. At least that's what his experience was. And The last part of that prayer, and the wisdom to know the difference. And this is also an important thing, if I think again with the guests, where it was tough to get some, but it's people might be genuinely busy. I also keep in my mind and think of. I can't say that everybody that has not responded did not want to be a guest, or it's not worth having a guest. There is one guest I have coming up. I think it's the next one I'm recording, where it was somebody I sent the email and I only got the response after sending the second email, and her response came, I think, like a week or two later. So on the one hand I could say, no, she's not interested. But the fact that somebody still got back to me after so many weeks, it gives me confirmation that, okay, this person is genuinely that busy and would be keen. And I can't predict, okay, maybe it doesn't go that well. But, hey, you gotta be optimistic. And you gotta know that, like, just because somebody didn't respond, reach out again. Send another email. Send another 2 emails. Like for me, I think 2 is the threshold now for me. If I go over 2, then I'm like, okay, yeah, feels like I'm begging, and begging is not ideal. Like if somebody genuinely wants to do something, they will make a plan and they will put in the effort. This is getting quite long, so I'm gonna go quicker through the next few points. Number 8. We remember the process and adversity we overcome along the way more than we actually value the end result. And if anything, we value the journey a lot more. And if you think about anything you truly wanted, and it took a lot of work, a lot of effort to get, and you think about how good you feel about all the work you put in, as opposed to what you ultimately got, which are you going to remember more? It's actually a fascinating thing to look at. And we have this preconceived notion that there is a sense that there is a point at which perfection is achieved or reached. But is it ever possible to reach perfection? When we practice something, we believe that there will be this point when we are able to play a song perfectly, or we are able to play perfectly. Like if you play a video game where you're going to have this perfect game. But I don't believe such a thing exists. A good comparison or a good thing to look at where you can see this at play is, at which point in a flower's life cycle, from seed to its death, has it reached perfection? Can you say there is a single point at which a flower is perfect? And secondly, is there such a thing as the perfect flower? What metrics do you measure its perfection by? By the color? Okay, then what is the perfect color? How will you know that it has reached that perfect color? Okay, if it's smell, okay, let's say you can say exactly what it is, how it must look, and so on. How long will it last in that state? How do you know it's going to last that long in that state? Getting things is fun, having things is not. There's so many times when I think of myself in my own experiences where I would feel once I achieve something or I get something, I will be happy. We have all had that, where we got something that we said would make us happy, or we accomplished something that we thought would give us fulfillment. But that point never exists. It never comes. Because fulfillment is not something that's going to be everlasting. It's not perpetual, Our needs change, our wants change, we ourselves change, the thoughts we have change. and naturally what we desire changes. So you may think, oh, once I get the Ferrari, I'll be happy. No, once you get the Ferrari, then it's going to be, that's a new standard maybe, and you have to uphold that lifestyle. And then it's not just the Ferrari, then it's going to be, oh, I have a Ferrari, but Jack has a Bugatti. There's constantly this moving goalpost. And that's the joy in taking joy in the process. And that's what I look at with the podcast. I want the podcast to grow. I can't lie about that. It'd be nice to open my phone one day and be like, oh, 2 million subscribers. But am I going to be fixated on that? Because as long as I have not reached that end goal, I'm dissatisfied. I'm every day feeling like, oh, I'm a failure because I have not reached that point. But if you appreciate the process and you accept, and not just accept, but you take pleasure in where you are and what you are doing, it's very difficult to feel dissatisfied. And that's something I see, like with the podcast, enjoying every single episode, just enjoying doing the action, for me is valid enough. Sure, I will still do everything else to see it grow. I will continue to put in work and learn more so that I'm knowledgeable myself, that I can bring my own spice to the conversation. And I'll continually reach out to guests, and I will do what it takes, to make it grow more, that I can hopefully one day monetize it and, see more come off it. But does it mean until I've done that I don't feel it is worthwhile? No. Every single step on this journey, I'm looking at all of it as the story I'm going to tell one day. If I have kids, it's going to be the story I tell them about this podcast I've done. And I think it'll be an awesome story to tell. I don't know how many people would also be able to tell this tale. I don't know anybody else doing a podcast. I know only maybe one person that is looking to start it, but nobody else doing it the way I'm doing it that I personally know. And I've spoken with quite a few people, and it seems kind of unusual to myself at first, but now it's like a new normal for me. And that brings me to point number 9. I'm not the person I thought I was, nor do I think I will ever know who I am. And when I think back to who I was when I left school, I think it's a good point to show, because I'm like 10 years since I finished school now. And in school, I did not enjoy English. English wasn't my favorite subject. In fact, it was the subject I did worst in. But now, I genuinely enjoy writing. I genuinely enjoy reading. It's not stuff I could have foreseen when I was in school. There's so much about me that is different. I think if my younger self had to see me, he would think I am an entirely different person. Because, I even see the difference physically. Despite age, which, I imagine I look a lot older. But when I was in school, I was a nerd, I was skinny, I was scrawny. I gotten quite bigger, put on a reasonable amount of muscle, and that is like a physical difference I can see. I would have never imagined I would look the way I look now. And I would have never thought I think the way I think now. Even when in school I had an interest in psychology, it's not the same interest in psychology I have now. Initially, my interest was understanding the way the brain works, the way the mind works. Now it's understanding people, I want to help people. I want to help people overcome blocks in their mind. I want to help people see the world differently. And that's two different mindsets. I've had my challenges, and I look at the world through a lens in which I see all those challenges. And I've seen the impact that my cognition, my viewpoint had on me, myself. And I've seen how your mind can be the limiting factor, not your capabilities or whatever capacities you have for a particular action. And when I left school, I was a straight A student, pretty much, yeah. And I would have never seen myself failing a course or subject or something. Over the years, my perception of myself has changed so drastically. Going from that to having moments where I thought of myself as an absolute failure. I thought of myself as, got no use for life. I've got no purpose. I'm purposeless. And I felt like an absolute failure, like I'm so far behind with everything, and why even bother? I'm wasting time. To having moments where I'm like, I don't feel that way anymore. I look at life in a different lens, where once I probably felt like I'm always on my own, I have no friends, or I'm single, nobody could ever want me. Now, I look at different scenarios, I see people in different situations, and I think, let's say I did finish that engineering degree and I was working, would I be happy? Would life have been different? Would I have even... How would I feel doing that work and then seeing this alternative reality that I now find myself in? And I see, I'm studying psychology in another universe, and I may be single and on my own, but I'm happy. I'm doing things that give me fulfillment. Like my time is always spent on activities I enjoy. That I'm able to sit in the evening and play game with the boys. And how would I look at the world? How would I look at my life from that situation? Seeing the podcasts I'm doing, seeing the conversations I'm having, seeing all the stuff that I've written, like, 30, I think I'm on 33 newsletters. Seeing that I've done that since the start of the year, pretty much. How would I felt, doing that engineering job that I maybe don't enjoy, that I don't have a passion for, that I feel like it's just a means to an end, that I'm doing it just for the paycheck. It's really fills me with solace and comfort that I can say I'm not looking at what I am doing with eyes on another activity. That I don't do it and feel like there's something else I would rather be doing. It's a feeling I don't know how to quite articulate. It's that I would not be envious of things being differently. And there's a quote I recently read by Alex Mosey that I love. It's, you get to choose your goals. You don't get to choose the challenges or adversities or whatever. You don't get to choose how you accomplish the goal. And yeah, there are challenges with doing the podcast and stuff. And in spite of that, I enjoy it. I don't see them as roadblocks that keep me from doing what I want to do. And yeah, it gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling inside. And yeah, that's the last point, which if you have listened this far, you have got a strong feel for it. and I love what I'm doing and thankful for the opportunity to do it. Super thankful for everybody that reads my newsletter. I wrote one a couple of weeks ago where I thanked everybody reading it. And I genuinely feel it. I'm super thankful for everybody that listens into the podcast, that watch it on YouTube, listens on Spotify or Apple Podcast. I'm super thankful because it, on the one hand, it gives me comfort and confirmation that I'm doing the right thing. And yeah, it gives me a sense of validation that what I'm doing is well worth it. Everybody wants to feel validated. You know, there's a lot, if I look online at this, and yeah, like sort of war between men and women, where everybody's saying, you know, the Red Bull community says women are X, Y, Z, women are like this, they want a man like that. And then there's, you know, the extreme feminist side where it's like there's no good man and yada yada yada. But when you look at the research and the statistics and what people want, ultimately people just want somebody that will value them and make you feel appreciated. That goes a long way. Just that feeling of appreciation and being recognized. Feeling that somebody else sees you the way God sees you or the way you want to be seen. And, you know, anybody that listens in on the podcast or reads the newsletter, I get that feeling in a sense that what I write about, who I am, is enough. And it's a comforting feeling. It is really amazing. I am forever thankful for everybody that's been a guest, especially in this early stages of the podcast. You know, I don't have much to offer people. Like, the least I can do is offer interesting conversation, promotion in a limited capacity where I will go and post this stuff everywhere I can. But I am super thankful for every single one of them giving me a shot, having faith in me that I will give them a worthwhile conversation in that moment. But also, if they want to promote themselves or what they are about, that I will do it, and that it is worthwhile being a guest on the podcast to get that outcome. And yeah, just to end off, like a little bonus one, it's a quote that I got from a podcast episode recently, and it's by Eric Weinstein, and it's like my number one go-to quote at this point. And yeah, it's quite a bit, so I'll read it out. Is there something that you're best at? Is there something you don't suck at that isn't valued by the world? You have to make room for self-esteem. You owe the world your eyes. Most of us die not having heard our own inner voice once. And yeah, I don't think I'm really gonna elaborate on that quote. Let it marinate in your mind. Yeah. And yeah, I think that's it for today. Again, thank you everybody that listens to the podcast. If you listen this far, yeah, I might as well speak on some plans for the podcast, stuff I'm keen for and excited for. So, yeah, I've recorded one in-person episode, which is absolutely awesome, and I want more of it. Like, I really enjoyed it. It was amazing. It's a different vibe. It feels a lot better. Like, it flows so much more. I'm able to interject and ask questions. So that's something I will, if the financials are there, hopefully they will be soon, then it will be something I do more of. And then, yeah, I've got a couple of authors, books that I've read that I've got here on my... Okay, they're not on the shelf there. They're on the shelf in front of me. Yeah, so one is going to be in terms of serial killers, and the other one's going to be looking at the relationship dynamics between fathers and daughters, which should be super interesting. And I think anybody that wants to know the role and value of a father, or yeah, that is just going to be an awesome episode. Like, the books are amazing. I don't want to give too much away, but then I've also got a couple of researches coming on, one in terms of different leadership styles for different projects. That is going to be cool as well. And yeah, I've been a guest on a podcast for the first time. I'm probably going to be a guest on a few more podcasts. Like, I'm going to put myself out there as well. And yeah, it's super fun. Like, I'm genuinely psyched for it. Yeah, that's all, folks. Thank you so much again. Keep well. Cheers.